don't you go ahead and
All right.
um, yeah, go ahead,
Good
Will.
morning. Hey, everyone. I'm Will. I work at Unbound Solar. We have basically what we call the Solar 101 straight answers about solar. This is the first installment, and it really is a 101. This is for people that are interested in solar but haven't really checked it out yet. Maybe they've done some light reading, but we're going to go over the basics for you, and then this will lead into a Solar 102.
Yeah. So hard to find good information on solar, battery based or grid tie. There's a lot of forums and there's a lot of opinions, and it's difficult to sort through all of them.
Yeah, opinions are like flies. Everyone has some. Um, Yeah, well, I thought the best way to go about this is I would present kind of a topic. Ben is really good about asking questions, especially from the perspective of a consumer, because he's bought several large ticket items like these. And then Schwa would be really good for answering questions, and I like to talk too. So I'll let you answer first, and then I'll answer. I'll chime in as well, and maybe start discussions on some of these. There's only about 10 topics.
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can get Connor to take a look and see if we get any comments, any questions as we kind of go through this, guys. So just so anybody who's viewing right now, if you want to leave any questions in the comments section, feel free. Happy to answer any solar questions that are burning questions. These are the best guys to get those answered. Very knowledgeable on off-grid and grid ties, solar systems. So feel free to leave those comments, and then we'll try to get to those. And if we don't, we'll go ahead and get back to you on whatever platform you're on to get that
Yeah.
answer.
So people might not know who we are or how long we've been doing off grid solar. We probably should tell them really quick.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't realize we were live. So I'm Will Berlin. I'm a project manager at Unbound Solar. Been doing solar for about 25 years now. I was the first employee at Unbound Solar when we were wholesale solar,
Yeah.
and I kind of learned the hard way doing installations with Mark Coleman, the founder.
Heck yeah. Yeah, and you started before me. I started with wholesale solar in 2010. I'd been working as a firefighter paramedic and had got my degree in education and sort of didn't really want to do either one of those things. So I took a job at wholesale solar and fell in love with batteries and off grid solar. And so I've been doing that for the last 15 years, working in system design as an applications engineer, doing technical support, providing plan sets, that kind of thing. Primarily off grid, battery based. I specialize in battery chemistry, lead acid, lithium iron phosphate, that kind of thing. And I mess around with grid tie a bunch as well because I just like to know all the things about solar. So I'm super excited to be here and help out.
Cool. So, Will,
Yeah.
why don't you kick it off? Why don't you kick it off? So, you have a bunch of questions, and we've done this, or we've already done a 101, but there's so much questions and things that we need to go through. It wasn't even enough for one session. So, why don't you go ahead and take off with where we left off?
Yeah.
Sure.
Solar
Sure.
101 is like a whole semester. We only covered like an hour.
Yeah. This is almost a precursor to what we did last time, kind of circling back and starting from the beginning as we build our content. This would probably be the intro to what we do. And we probably do this again later too with live questions. That's kind of the goal of the whole thing. So with solar, there's different types of systems for different needs. There's grid tie, there's off grid, and then there's hybrid. For a grid tie, I'm going to go over the bullet points real quick. It's designed to reduce or eliminate your electrical bill. It's the lowest upfront cost and the quickest return on investment, and there's little to no maintenance at all. So, grid tie, excuse me, is the most, I wouldn't say popular, but it's the most common and readily available system on the market because, frankly, everyone does these in California to reduce their bills. We have off-grid systems. These are designed to provide power with locations that don't have electricity. There is an additional battery and equipment cost, and of course, the battery has maintenance The inverters and stuff have programming that the end user really needs to be fluent with their own programming. And then finally, we have grid tie with battery backup. And I think we did these slides before the NEM agreement. So there's also this load shaving system that would play into this topic, grid tied plus battery backup. It keeps your critical loads and appliances protected against grid outages. The batteries will definitely increase the upfront costs. And again, there's going to be battery and programming maintenance with this. When you get into the, what do you call it, Schwa, the energy mitigation? That's got
energy arbitrage, I like to call it.
So those are the 3 types of systems. Do you guys want to drill down on any questions on that before I move on?
Yeah. Well, maybe just provide more clarity on it just for the sake of discussion. I was thinking, when you're thinking about grid tied inverters, the big thing to keep in mind is that they are synchronizing inverters. Like, that is the type of inverter that they are. And that means that they can't make their own AC waveform out of nothing, or like out of DC power. Right? They can't make 12240 AC power and send it somewhere, right? They have to have the grid, have to be available.
Sorry, I'm dipping upstairs into my own stuff.
No worries, brother. They have to. Remind me, I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry, guys.
No, the silverware made me want bacon, and now all I want is bacon. I had turkey bacon this week, and it was pretty terrible by comparison. What was I saying about solar stuff, though? No.
Well, yeah.
It was about grid-tied inverters being synchronizing inverters, right? They can't make 12240 AC and send it somewhere. They can't make a sine wave, a waveform. They can only synchronize with AC power that's already there. Okay, so just a grid tie only inverter can synchronize with grid. It looks at grid and goes, okay, I see what you're doing. I can do that too. Okay, we're synced, and push current, right? But as soon as the grid goes away, you have nothing, right? That inverter can't take solar power and make AC electricity from it that you can use. So if you're grid tie only and the power grid goes down, so does your solar system, so does all of your loads, and so does everything. And this is like a known thing, So I'm disheartened by folks who are, like, what the heck, man? I got all these solar panels and the grid went out. Here I am sitting in the dark, right? Like, setting the proper expectations on grid tie only is a really big deal, because as soon as you go to off grid, now you have batteries. You can make your own power. You don't need the power grid to be making AC power to have lights and get water and do all of this stuff. And the same with grid tie with battery backup. That was the hybrid system we talked about at the very end. That also gives you the ability to, make your own power without having the grid there. It also brings this whole, it's like a dynamic shift in what the return on investment is. Because when you're doing grid tie, like, you're looking at your power bill and you're going, how much do I pay every month for power? Right? Like, and how much does the solar equipment cost to make that power? And do some fancy math and go, the return on investment, the payback is 3 years. It's 4 years. It's whatever. It's like very definitive. You can calculate it, And as soon as you're backing up loads and you have batteries, now the return on investment's kind of askew, because it's not about offsetting your power bill. Now, if you're off grid, it's now I have power somewhere where there previously was none, right? And if your grid tie battery backup, your return on investment is, I used to have all the food in my fridge would go bad if the power went out for 3 days. But now the power goes out and my solar continues to run all of my critical loads. And it's, how do you put a price on that? I mean, that sounds corny, but it's, the return on investment is different because giving yourself more tools.
Yeah, no, I think when we talk about return on investment, it's so dynamic in the sense that it's going to be different for everybody in their situation. Look, all over the country, utilities have different rates. Some are only paying 13 cents a kilowatt hour, and to simply put what a kilowatt hour is to a lot of people who might have heard of it but don't quite understand what that is. That is a unit of measurement that the utility uses to understand how much usage you use. So think of it as a tablespoon of energy. And so at the end of the month, they say, well, how many tablespoons of energy, or in that regard, how many kilowatt hours did they use? And if it's 13 cents a kilowatt hour, then, your bill is going to be, let's just say it averages out to $100. Now, if you take that house and you move it into California and you're under like PG&E or Southern Edison Electric or San Diego Gas and Electric, they're like 30 to like 60 cents depending on the time of day. That's like 4 times as much. So that $100 bill that you might have gotten in Montana is going to be $400 in California. So now it's like, okay, my cost of living is so much higher, and we're starting to see this all over. Like, look at Texas. Like, Texas is now like starting to be one of the biggest solar adopters after California, and their cost of energy is very high. So batteries, though they might be more expensive, it could still be a huge return on investment. Your timeline could be a lot shorter than you might think with batteries in California, because you're paying so much a month renting your power. And so now you can store that energy on your property and use that energy at night and not have to buy these expensive inflating rates that we're seeing on the utility companies in California. And then probably what we're going to start seeing in other states. It's starting to California is kind of always the guinea pig, right? Everything always starts in California, and then we start to see that seep into other states. So a lot of people are like, yeah, solar is just not worth it. Like, I promise you, the next 5 or 10 years, you're going to really start considering it. And then who knows what kind of regulations, pricing, tariffs. There's already some tariffs coming out to make solar more expensive. So there's never a bad time to start getting into solar if you're looking for some return on investment. You just need someone to kind of educate you and show you how that is. And we do a really good job here at Gigawatt, Unbound, Go Green, and Alt E. So I just want to make that very clear. I don't know if you guys want to kind of speak on that a little bit.
I just think it's hysterical how the whole thing kind of plays out. Like the power company wants to make more money, so they need to be charging people more. And so they get like a think tank of people together, and they're like, well, all right, let's see. More people use power from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Let's make power twice as expensive then. And they're like, oh, right, that's good to make power more expensive. That sounds good, more money. So then people are like, well, all right, look, I make battery-based inverters, and I've set up an inverter that can, store power from solar and then invert it to run loads only when power is more expensive. So I'm filling up my batteries with solar, and I'm going to start using that battery power to run loads at 5 p.m. And I'm going to run loads from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. when it's twice as expensive. Neener, neener in your face, stupid power company think tank team that thought they could get me. And so then, and it's like a game, So then the power company people are like, well, okay, so what can we do? We still need to get more money, and they've made a better inverter. So let's see. Let's make it not about how many teaspoons of energy you consume over time, or even when, but how many teaspoons you're using at a time. Say, oh, look here, you are using 40 teaspoons of energy at a time. That's going to cost you. If you're using that many teaspoons of energy all at one time, running a bunch of loads, oh boy, it's going to cost you. And it's like, everybody's just trying to find a way to ding you for something. Well, you used more power. Okay, well, I didn't. Oh, well, you used it at a different time and it costs more at that. Well, okay, well, then I didn't. Well, at one point during your billing cycle, we saw you were using 80 teaspoons of power. And because you crossed that threshold, now you're into a different tier. because you used more than this at any given time during the last bill. And it's like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, they're so creative in finding a way to nail you to the wall over utility usage. And the engineers that make solar gear are like, they're not missing a beat either. They're like, well, all right, fine. Then we made an inverter that can do, like the first one we were talking about was, like the energy arbitrage. We're going to save power and then we're going to use it at this time, right? But then you have to have an inverter that can do, something a little more unique. Now you have to have an inverter that says, all right, look, I'm using power from the grid, but I can never use more than 8,000 watts of grid power to run loads at a time. What? Why? That's stupid. Because if I do, they're going to put me into a different billing tier and it's going to cost me $200 a month. So the inverter manufacturers are like, oh, great. We're going to do peak load shaving as the new thing our inverter can do. And so what we'll do is we'll get in and say, well, okay, you can use up to 10,000 watts from grid or whatever it is. And if you're using more than that, your inverter and batteries are going to make up the difference, right? Like if you can use 10,000 watts from grid and you tell your inverter that, like, hey, man, no more than that. And you're pulling 15,000 watts worth of loads to run all your stuff, right? 10,000 watts are coming from the grid. 5,000 watts are coming from your batteries and inverter and solar stuff. And you can never use more than 10 kW of grid power because you programmed it. This is all you're allowed to use. And so they're just bickering back and forth. Like they make more rules, then they make a smarter inverter. So then they make more rules, and then they make an even smarter inverter. And it's like they're just, I don't know. I enjoy watching it, kind of.
Yeah, it's just going to be this ongoing battle. And it's kind of interesting because I do feel like the utility company, especially you look at California, and they got rid of the net metering, just so everybody understands, kind of going back to the kilowatt hour thing. So utilities used to give you pretty much a full credit. So, I mean, if a kilowatt hour costs you 40 cents to pull off PG&E in California, for example, if you put one of those credits back, more or less, they give you about a 40-cent credit. So then at nighttime when the sun sets, you just draw that energy back off, but you're using your piggy bank of credits. And therefore you net zero that day. Now, if you look at that at 12 years, you build up a big piggy bank of credits throughout the summer months. And then when the sun is not shining as good and your energy might go up a little bit, depending if you have a gas or electric heating, you can use up all those credits because those credits would roll over for a full 12-month period. Now what PG&E has done is saying, hey, anything you put into the grid, we're only going to give you like a fraction of the value. So we're not going to give you the 40. We're not giving you the 40-cent credit anymore. Now, everybody who got into it, when they did, they're grandfathered in. So a lot of people are grandfathered in. They still have like basically a net zero bill at the end of the year. But anybody trying to go solar now, there's just no, the net metering just does not exist anymore. So that now batteries is kind of the new weapon, right, for homeowners to battle. It used to be like, the inverters and Enphase for string inverter. Now it's batteries are like really becoming a part of the conversation, which is forcing these manufacturers to come up with solutions that are affordable. And there's some really affordable options, especially if you're paying a ton of money on your monthly bills and you're looking for ways to either lower or eliminate your monthly bills to a utility company and protect you from inflation. And two, have that extra security of backup, because now it's like, if the power goes out, we've all experienced it with PG&E or even Pacific Power. I'm up in Northern California. Half the town was out yesterday, and largely to do with safety issues and the fire issues they've been having with these old grids, right, that they haven't been upgrading. So they are going to be having outages to make sure if it's too windy or something, they don't want to start another fire. So it just is kind of twofold, and I'm loving, because batteries was kind of like, it was really for the really well-off people, and I think it's becoming more and more affordable for a lot of common homeowners. especially in the more expensive states like California or Texas.
I have to put my husky dog outside. I think she's being a snot.
Well, I think it's a good opportunity to, hey, and just everybody who's out there, all of our viewers, if you have any questions, comment in the section, and we'll have our very experienced technicians answer those questions. There's probably nothing you can get past them. I actually dare you to try to stump them. And so leave a comment in the question. And
I want to get stumped.
Yeah, see if you can stump Schwa with a solar question, whether it's a high level question, there's no dumb question, or if you're one of those nerds that want to try to get in the weeds with some specs, good luck, because he is the smartest, and so is Will. And Will, I want to kind of throw this back in your court because I know you have a lot of things you want to cover, and we don't want to hog the mic. What else did you want to kind of touch on, or are you still kind of have some ideas around our current topic?
Well, I think you guys went from 101 to 117. It goes like this. For those of you who are 101, you have grid tie solar. It's the cheapest. And the whole intention is a return on investment. So if you want to invest $7,000, the idea is that you pay that off in the amount of electricity that you didn't buy in 3 or 4 years. The takeaway is that this equipment, the solar panels are guaranteed at 25 years. Most inverters are guaranteed at least 10 to 25. And so that's what makes it a safer investment. That this is actually, you're spending some money today at today's inflation rate on this equipment that's going to work for 25 years, as your electrical bill does not stay static. It grows and it increases every year. So the investment comes quicker and quicker.
You guys see this? This is my power bill.
Yep.
Wow, $500.
Did you leave?
What's your kilowatt usage? What's your kilowatt hour usage this month? Because let's take this in perspective and try to think about what this might cost in other states or in different.
It's bananas.
What are you doing? What are you?
None of your beeswax. No, I'm not growing weed or anything. I have like 5 acres. I have a lot of outdoor lighting. I have a very large 3-story house that also has a lot of indoor lighting, air conditioning, heating. I have, birds. I have multiple fish tanks. I have geckos. I have like a lot. I have like a lot of stuff going on. I have a heated pool. I have a fountain. Like, it's bananas, dude. All the stuff I have. It should be criminal to use this much electricity. I don't know why I do. I wish I did.
Well, you'd probably be closer to $1,000 if you were a little more south.
Right. I wouldn't be able to afford this if I was in Southern California. I could tell you that flat out without even looking. Because Pacific Power up in Northern California, Southern Oregon, we're paying, without looking, I would guess probably 13 cents a kilowatt hour.
No. I think they just raised it 25% this year. So I think we were around 15, 16. I wouldn't be surprised if you did the math, minus the $10 interconnection fee that's static. I bet we are closer to 17, 18 cents. I've heard a lot of my neighbors. A lot of people here in like Wairika, Siskiyou County. I mean, obviously I live 20 minutes from Ushuaia, but like they're like all complaining. And so that's a lot, has to do with the dam removal. I don't know. There's when they remove dams, they pass on that cost to the homeowners. So and then you just have inflation, right? You just have, like if you were to think about when you were 16, how much did your gas cost? Right. Well, the same thing is happening to your electricity. It says you're not looking at it every day like you do when you drive past a gas station. So we're very aware of gas prices going up. We're very aware of like food prices going up, but we don't really stare and look at our electric bill. All we know is like, I remember it being a lot cheaper like a couple of years ago. And that's just inflation, them adding extra taxes, them adding extra line items that you're not really aware of until one day you're just looking at your billing statements and being like, what the heck? So that's something you can never get away from. It's like renting a home. It's like The landlord's going to increase the rent. When you own a home, you can get a mortgage and get that payment fixed, and then you can actually pay it off. It's the exact same thing with solar. A lot of people don't think of it that way. So it's like you can spend a monthly bill to pay off your solar system instead of paying the utility. And it's like it's just a different way of paying for your electricity. In fact, you can actually pay it off, unlike your utility bill, which is a forever bill.
Dude,
Right?
it's a forever bill. I can't find a total monthly tally, but it says that on average I'm 50 kilowatt hours a day or more. It's generally not less than.
Yeah.
That's not bad.
What about the winter months?
I'm embarrassed about it. But at another level, like I mentioned, I have pets. I'm allowed to have pets. You know, like I have kids. I'm allowed to have kids. I live in a big place, and it's like I don't know. I didn't always have a super crazy expensive power bill, but it's just crept up on me over time, over the years. Like, and I have no excuse. I know how to read a power bill. I know what all of those numbers mean. You know, it's just that I haven't done anything about it because, you know, I'm doing all the things around my house that I like, and I'm not running around telling my kid, you got to turn everything off. I'm putting these on timers and turn it out. Like I don't have that in me right now. And at some point I probably will. But as of now, it's like the cost of electricity has just crept up on me. And it wasn't something that I was considering when I was like, oh my gosh, I've been researching crested geckos and you know, vivariums, and these are the different kinds of plants you want in them, and this is the temperature and humidity that geckos want. And like I'm like, yes, oh my God, this is so cool. I wasn't thinking, well, how many dollars per month is this? Let's see, it's $18 a month to have a gecko habitat and the fish tanks. I was just kind of like, I really want these things. I want fish and lizards and birds and animals to take care of. That's what I want to be in that environment. And it's just expensive when it comes to electricity. And
what if you gave each like aquarium and all of these different containers of their little like off-grid systems, like little miniature like panels and a little battery storage?
There you go.
Well, here's an interesting thing. When you're doing grid tie and you're talking about how much solar you use in that, it all seems like relatively cut and dry because it's just grid power. You use however much you use and you pay however much the bill is. When you're putting together an off-grid system, you find that power, when you make it and store it yourself, comes at a premium, right? I would go through and look at like my large fish tank has got, you know, 2 aerators, 2 pumps, 2 heaters, several lights. Like it would be okay. You need, this is 200 amp hours at 12 volts and, you know, 1,000 watts of inverter. And it would be, you know, it would be at least $2,000 or $3,000 to make an off-grid system for just my one fish tank. That's how off-grid works when you're trying to make and store all of your own power and turn it from DC to AC and all. Like there's a lot that goes into it. And frankly, there would be no way that I could possibly afford to do off-grid systems for all of those little things. The only answer would be to use less power. You know, I can get rid of all of my pets on Facebook or Craigslist or something and just not have them anymore. Or, you know, you could put in a grid tie system that would offset a bunch of it. You know, it introduces the question of, you know, at what rate am I buying it? See, I ain't paying attention. I thought it was 12 or 13. And Ben's like, yeah, no, it's like 18 or 20. And I'm like, oh, shit, I guess I'm not paying attention. You know what I mean? So it's, I don't know.
I'd like to chime in. Okay, so like what Schwa just said, if he wants to create an off-grid system to run his fish tank, it's going to be a couple of $1,000s. Here's the kicker for somebody that hasn't studied solar yet and trying to decide what to do. And like, why would I want to put in a grid-tied system when I could be off-grid? Well, The hard answer is that electricity from the utility is cheap. It seems expensive, but it's cheap compared to making your own and storing it and becoming a self-sufficient energy provider of your own electricity. It's just the nature of the equipment. Off-grid is coming down in cost year after year. It's gotten cheaper and cheaper, but it's relatively cheap to just buy power from the grid.
Right. You could scrounge around and try to get, cost-effective equipment, cheap equipment, used equipment, like cobble together an off-grid system that's, works. And everybody's like, oh my God, what is that? Did you get it at the Salvation Army? And it's, and maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. It's the idea is, what is the idea? I lost my train of thought again. The idea
Why
is
would you go off grid?
no, that's not right. I don't know.
Well, no, I think that's another thing. So a lot of people are so hellbound on like, I want 100% offset my bill, and yes, absolutely. Like even in scenarios where I think, even in scenarios where we're basically, we're not getting good buyback from the utility, you go to like, say, let's go to PG&E in California, like even a 50% offset. So a grid tie system can be very beneficial. I mean, if you're using a ton of energy during the day, especially where you're getting most of the cost is like from the pool that people are running, the pumps, and also from the AC. And, we get those long days where we still have sun at like 7 o'clock. You have some panels on the west side. You can actually offset a lot of your power throughout the entire year, just even with a grid tie system. Just know you want to build a system that is going to be a lot smaller than if you were going to go a traditional 100% offset. And so I think that's important. Like you can get into the solar game. You don't have to get the batteries quite yet and still cut your bill in half and still have a really nice return on investment with a grid tie system. But you do have to think about how you use power during the day and have realistic expectations around that. Because I think the whole thing is, it's like, look, get set up with a battery backup ready, get a grid tie, get your feet wet with solar, see those savings, get that payback timeline really low. And then you can always come back and add batteries. Like if you had a Solarc, we'll just put a Solarc installer in there. I'm seeing a Solarc inverter in there, and hey, hook up your generator if you have an outage. And then when the time's right, let's just add batteries to that and make that even more convenient for you. Like there's so many options now for homeowners to start getting into solar at a really cost-effective rate, and really starting to see that return on investment day one. Don't wait for, I'm going to wait for batteries to get cheaper. I'm going to wait till I can do 100% offset. That doesn't make sense to me. It's like you're throwing money away to the utility company when you can actually be using that to invest in your power plant. So it's like, I think it's just a matter of being educated on that, seeing what your options are and seeing what your like return on investment and your savings timeline is. And that's something that we do really good here at Unbound Gigawatt and Alt East. So
I remember what I was going to say.
Yeah.
It was about, I'm sorry, that was really rude. But I remember it was about if you're buying power from the utility company and it's whatever, it's 12 cents or it's 18 cents a kilowatt hour. What I was thinking was you can get in and calculate how much it costs per kilowatt hour to collect from solar, store in batteries, and then invert out to your loads. And I've done it before, and I haven't done it recently, but I recall it being 65 cents a kilowatt hour to be able to invert power out from batteries through a battery-based inverter to run your loads. Like 65 cents a kilowatt hour. So it's way more expensive to fully run things off grid. And I don't know that that's a airtight number, but it occurred to me that, yeah, you can calculate this. Like if you take all the cost of a system and divide it up and figure it out, like it's a tangible number, how much cost per kilowatt hour that you're pulling out of batteries. And it's huge by comparison to the grid. Even if you're paying 25 cents a kilowatt hour. And you're like, power here is ridiculously expensive. It's a crime. It's still going to be cheaper than making power off grid. That's a fact.
Yeah.
That was what I was thinking. And then
I think Will, he definitely Will brings up topics and then we just expand on it, right? So I think it's very, I like having the QA. Let's try to hone back in. Let's let Will kind of, where would you like this to go, Will? Because I know that you really wanted to tackle a couple things.
Now I'm distracted. My wife just brought me banana bread.
No way!
Okay. So
for real?
Yeah, for real.
Dope, man.
She looked cute too. Okay.
This has got to be the Solar Banana Bread podcast for sure.
Dudes like me can get married if you just get solar now. Okay. So basically,
banana bread, be happy by solar.
Oh yeah. Okay. We got Grid Tie. It's the cheapest and it's going to help you offset your bill and get a return on investment. Here's an example. I had $5,000 that I saved up through blood, sweat, and tears. I had it in my checking account. Well, now that $5,000 is worth about $4,500 because inflation got me. If I had invested that in something tangible, I wouldn't have lost $500. That's Grid Tie. You add batteries to it, and now you can be Grid Tie with battery backup. You can serve some of your loads in the event of a power failure, but also you can do power energy arbitrage, where when the electrical company pulls their tricks on you and charges more money from 5 to 8, you can just feed the power to your loads out of your batteries. That's Grid Tie with battery backup. And then finally, we have off grid, which is screw the electric company. I'm going fully off grid. I do not condone that. It's not the best idea, but it works great on your ranch or cabin, or you bought a property in Colorado that doesn't have utility. That's
what
where
you don't condone that. Yes, you do.
I do not condone when I get a call and the guy is like, I am so mad at PG&E. I'm pulling the plug. I'm going off grid. And I just think,
for people that have grid power already and just don't want to use it.
He's got
you
got an airplane hangar and a swimming pool and a hot tub. And I'm just thinking, even if you throw $1 million at an off-grid system, you're not going to be happy.
The way I like to look at that real quick, just to add to that, is think of get batteries and use the grid as a backup source along with your generator. Just think of them as a backup source. You're still connected to them. You're just paying the minimum, monthly connection fee that everybody pays, but you have them as a backup. And in case you want to throw a huge rave party and your batteries don't have enough juice, now you can kind of just buy some from them. So I just look at as the utility as a backup source if you're going batteries on a Grid Tie system. And I would agree, don't disconnect. You're still going to want to have that.
If you have grid, keep it, period.
Yeah, it's relatively cheap. Like I'll say, it seems expensive, but when it comes to building your own electricity, the grid is not that expensive. So I wanted to go over real quickly the components of a grid tied system and then have you guys chime in. Since this is the simplest system and it doesn't have batteries, it's literally just the solar panel, which puts out DC power. It goes through an inverter, which inverts the DC power to AC. And then the inverter feeds into your meter and your house loads. So you've got a DC solar panel with a little computer, copper windings and whatnot that make it mesh with the grid. And Schwa had a term for it earlier, synchronicity or something like that. The inverter doesn't create power that you can use in real time, but it syncs with your utility grid and essentially pushes power back through their meter, turning the meter backwards, which creates your credit.
Why don't you give them a quick 101 on what DC and AC is, just so people who might not know what that is, you guys talk about it every day. I think it's really important to kind of just help educate people. Like, why can't I use DC? What is DC? I mean, I know there's a band called AC/DC. Why don't you explain that so they understand?
And why did they call it that? I mean, that was way ahead of its time. It was in Australia, though. Maybe they had more DC power over there. DC power is the original. It's called direct current. It's just electricity flowing at your product that you're trying to use power. It's like a car battery is DC. You can't go plug your hair dryer into your car cigarette lighter, right? They're different kind of power. Your house uses AC, alternating current.
What is alternating current? Just explain that. Direct current is just like pure straight juice. Like if you touch it, you're gonna die because it's just hardcore direct current.
Right. It doesn't change directions and it doesn't stop at any point. Direct current, if you looked at it on an oscilloscope or something that gives you a digital display of it, you would see that direct current is a flat line. It is just a flat baseline, and that's all it is. So it's direct current versus alternating current. Now we have this cool thing where the direction that energy is moving changes 60 times every second, right? So that's where you see the sine wave. It's the sideways S that goes up and down and up and down and up. And that is alternating current. And so what they do is, like, if you take direct current and then you run it through like a magnetic field that's rotating with like a rotor and a stator, as if you were looking at the DC baseline, as you rotated the wheel and the magnet got closer to it, it would start to push it down. So it was flat DC, but then you can see it starts to bend down. And so then once it gets going 60 times a second, we have alternating current, right? And so if you look at it, it just is a sideways S.
Why do utilities use alternating current? Like if DC works, I know AC is a little safer. Like if you were to touch something that was AC, like a 200 amp service, you're going to get messed up. You have a better chance of surviving. But if you hit a 200 amp service that's direct current, you're toast. Your head would probably pop off. I know it's a little more safer. I'm not recommending you guys do this, of course, but just to give you some context, why do the utility? Is that just a safety thing? Is there any benefit to AC? Just to kind of bring this full circle, panels can only produce DC. So what Will was talking about was like the panels produce DC. It's not alternating yet.
It's raw.
The grid is the one that's all AC going up and down. You got to make your solar flatline do that shit with an inverter.
Yeah, sorry, Will. Oh, he's like, I'm over you guys. Keep talking. Okay. Oh, you're having a go. So, Will, why don't you explain? Okay, so now that we kind of have an idea of what AC is and why, I guess my extra prone question is like, well, why do we have to have AC? Why can't we just have the energy right from the solar panels? Why does the utility need to have AC? Do we have the context?
I'll give a dumbed down version of it, and then Schwa can elaborate. But if you look back in time, DC power was the first one invented. And then it's raw, it's real crude, and it's just bang. It doesn't travel very far. And this is my opinion why we use AC current is DC just doesn't travel very far. If you look at the power from your car battery to the starter, you have cables this big to go 6 feet. Along the lines, who was it? Edison or Tesla? I can't remember. One of them took DC power and made AC power that travels in the sine wave. It can go thousands of miles on the power lines. That's my
in the race.
Yeah.
Over Edison's stupid DC power, which was dumb.
I will say AC power is extremely dangerous, though, for whatever reason. And I thought this might be a conspiracy. The 60 hertz that the sine wave travels on is exactly the same as your heart. And if you're an electrician and you grab onto a light up in the box and you're locking into it, you can't let go.
That's nonsense. That has nothing to do with your heart.
You never got locked on?
I've got locked on, but that has to do with muscle tetany and calcium and potassium pumps in your muscles.
Then why did my teacher tell me it was the hertz?
Because your teacher was an uninformed person.
Oh my goodness. Everything I know is a lie.
There. Yeah, I know you wanted to say something else there.
Oh my God, my background in cardiology is pretty extensive. I would argue I know most things there are to know about the human heart.
Yeah, you were like going to be an EMT, right? Or you were an EMT?
Oh, I worked as a flight medic for years. I worked as an emergency room technician for years. And yeah, I spent a lot of time doing like emergency flights of cardiac patients because we were on the Oregon coast, and so we would fly them to Portland or to Medford to the catheter lab, for their heart attacks and things like that. So I learned a antload about cardiology along the way.
So you don't think 60 hertz has anything to do with it?
No, it has nothing to do with it.
And how come they invented 50 hertz for Europe to be safer?
It's not safer.
Everything I know is a lie.
Or everything I know is a lie.
Well, here's the thing too. That's why. I mean, if we want to talk about products, which you're about to get into, this might be a good segue, Wills. Is the nice thing about Enphase is you're dealing with AC current. I mean, the way you plug it in, it's hard to get electrocuted, and there's a lot of safety measures within those inverters. So I know a lot of DIYers like that because one, it's easy to expand the micro inverters. You just add another inverter. And you're not dealing with DC current, which can be a little concerning sometimes. But I think nowadays there's even more safety measures in like string inverters, which are dealing with more of the DC side. But as far as equipment goes, I know Enphase is like pretty much plug and play, very safe. And yeah, I don't know if you guys want to add on to that, segueing into equipment. What?
We've been doing Enphase like since they came out. You remember?
They're the gold standard, yeah. Enphase is like the crown jewel of like inverters. I mean, they got a good 25-year. Most string inverters, you're looking at 10.
Right. And I mean, look, when I started 15 years ago, Enphase M190s were a thing, right? And like of all of the manufacturers we were working with in 2010 for inverters, Enphase is like the one that's still a thing. They're still a successful company, and they've only gotten more successful since then.
Yeah.
I don't even remember the other inverter companies that we were working with then because they're gone.
Yeah, and honestly, I didn't think Enphase was going to make it because they were more expensive at the time per volume per what you get. And then they just kept on keeping on. They meet all the local codes. They meet the codes before they even happen. Fully expandable. I could shoot some holes in it too if we want to talk pros and cons, but ultimately, yeah, I do like Enphase inverters, especially for the easy whiz-bang sales and installations.
Right. It's possible to put together a grid-tied system for less money than with Enphase. But it's also possible to go out and buy a more cost-effective car than a Tesla. It's kind of like, I don't know.
You get what you pay for.
It's reliable, and it's. I don't know if it's fair to say that it's high end, but maybe it is fair to say that it is one of the high end grid-tied manufacturers that's been there a really long time, and it costs a little bit more. But their service is banging, and their equipment is great. So I don't know. Enphase is really great if you're looking at it from what is a really good, reliable system that has all of the intuitiveness and all of the little, tricks and things. Enphase is perfect. If you are looking at it specifically through the lens of price per watt and what is the most effective way to return on investment, be shorter, it might not be Enphase. Enphase is designed to be like the smartest, easiest to install setup, not the cheapest grid tie solution on earth.
Ironically,
their interconnection is easy. I mean, I hear it's easy. The support, like the apps, everything you want. It's very user friendly, and they have good support. Mm-hmm. I think if you're looking for a solid solution, they do batteries too. And if you want to add batteries, they can do batteries, but in some cases, some people might be better off with a solar. I think it's just having that conversation with a very experienced advisor who has years of experience in solar, really knows the pros and cons and gets to know your situation and what you need for for whatever your situation, it's going to be different for everybody. So I think people who try to go in there with a cookie cutter mindset, I would really, really recommend talking to an advisor to help put a design together and answer your questions so you can feel confident moving forward with your purchase decision, because it is a huge investment. And I think a lot of people need to understand that, like trying to cut corners on a huge investment, like a power plant for your house, I just wouldn't recommend it. I mean, there's options out there. There's some cost-effective options out there that are pretty good, but I think you're going to end up saving more money, making that a little more of an investment, getting it done right the first time. Because I think we've all done DIY projects where we try to cut corners, and at the end of the day, you end up opting in for that more expensive thing, but you can't return that thing that you bought in the beginning. So, I mean, take it from experience, take it from your own experience. I think going for the better products, having and talking to an advisor that understands the products really well and can mold that to your needs and necessities for your home power plant, I think is probably the biggest advice I can give. Like, don't try to go out there and freestyle and just grab this component and this component because you read on Reddit that they can kind of work together, right? I know a lot of DIYers love their Reddit, but be careful what you read on Reddit because there's a lot of misinformation. And I know Schwa can attest to that because you read a lot of that stuff and you're just like facepalm,
Yeah, I have found that it's easier for me to just largely avoid Reddit and off-grid forums. There's so much wrong information being put out there that it's like it causes me anxiety. I'm like, oh my God, I can't be like logging off of working on solar tech stuff all day and then like looking at Facebook to be like, oh my God, this guy said that this thing you could do with this and you can't. And it's like, I can't police them. I don't even bother looking. I can't correct
cheap
those
plug here. Cheap plug here. Where can you get really good content on off-grid that is trustworthy and accurate? Where do you guys think? I was going to say unbound.com. I mean, we're like the off-grid leaders there. We spent years creating content there, and it's very easily searchable, right? So if you go on unboundsolar.com, guys, just go to the Learn Hub, and you'll find everything you need to learn about when it comes to off-grid solar.
That's probably one of the better resources. And what Unbound Solar is that's just redirecting to the old Wholesale Solar website where all of the good information originally lived, and it's a great resource where there's a ton of information that you could put together. Will and I and several other of the techs there have been, assembling all of that stuff for the last 10 to 15 years. That's all articles that Will's put together and that I've put together and that marketing has helped us polish up, I don't know. It's incredibly difficult to find good information about off-grid equipment. I find that if you call any of the off-grid companies, you will be greeted by a very friendly person who probably doesn't know anything about off-grid. And like you have to find your way to a technical trainer or an applications engineer or something if you want to really know how stuff works. And it can make it really difficult to track down the right kind of information. Like I've been doing this for long enough that I have a contact at Morningstar. I know a guy at Enphase. I have a guy at Magnum. I know several people at Schneider. Like I can reach out to engineers and find answers to things because I've been doing it for so long. So like the best resource for off-grid information is me, and if I'm not available, probably the Unbound website, because all of that information there, or at least a good part of it, is stuff that I wrote down and we all decided this needs to be on the website. And I don't know. Yeah. I don't know where to go.
You got a lot of videos. Hey, and you got a ton of videos of Schwag talking about off-grid stuff on our YouTube page as well. So I want to give that plug too. I mean, if you want some information, Schwaz explains battery backup in a really easy way to understand with critical
Oh,
loads. He's got
I
charge
sent out a link
controller.
to that yesterday. Like that 15-minute video of me programming a Magnum inverter and a Midnight Classic where I go through every single menu and talk about what the settings are. I sent that out just yesterday to somebody. That video has like, dude, thousands of views. I was like, oh my God, that many thousands of people have watched me do this. I hope I don't have a booger in my nose.
Yeah, we're going to be doing a lot more of that too. Go ahead, Will.
This new thing we're doing with these chit chats, fireside chats, whatever we're going to call it, is to me evolution of the old stuff. The old content, the old videos are awesome, but we were also kind of being held down. Like nobody's let us just talk before. And so as this thing evolves, we're going to get into some content that's just going to be way better. I mean, we're not in sales. I don't care if you buy solar or not, which is really what gives this a democratic vibe. You know, we're going to talk about equipment, we're going to talk about theory, but there isn't a sales agenda. Like at the end of the day, we're trying to explain, you know, grid tie is two pieces of equipment and your utility, and off grid has another piece of equipment and some programming stuff. And really we're throwing around brand names and stuff, but we're not tied to any of them. They're not giving us money to talk about their brands. They're just the ones that have survived this long. Just a quick recap. We talked about Enphase. That's a brand of microinverters. It's spelled ENPHASE, and they have a bazillion content on their webpage. I've heard Ben throw out the name Solarc a couple of times. Somebody that's a new listener might not know what that means. It almost sounds like you're saying solar, but it's Solarc. Like Noah's Ark is where they got the idea. You know, these are military vets that are religious, and they're like solar arc. It's a ship that's going to save you. It's Solarc. It's a grid-tied inverter that can accept batteries. Those are really the two big players in the game today, you know, and that's why we keep talking about them. It's not because we want to sell it. And then we have these new brands coming on our radar. They've been around and they're tried and true, like Hoy Miles and you know, the Canadian Solar EP Cube. And so while we're brand agnostic, we don't really have a preference on these. They're all very similar and have their unique, you know, pros and cons and different price points. You know, that's up to the end user to decide what they're going to buy.
Right. I feel like they're all commodities. I was struggling just this morning to make a recommendation for a gal who was like, wanted lithium iron phosphate batteries, and she had been using Discover with her Schneider inverter and was like, these are so expensive. I see all these other ones. Like, is there anything else I could use other than Discover? And I was like deer in the headlights. Like, yeah, I mean, there's like a million lithium iron phosphate batteries. And I literally was like struggling to come up with an answer, right? I was like, God, well, you know, there's different quality of cells and different quality of BMS and different quality of, you know, technical support and availability after the point of sale. And there's different, like, it's so hard to quantify what is a decent battery. And I don't know.
It's not always the case either.
I weaseled out of giving an answer entirely.
Yeah, I think customers.
One of those 12 volts, 100 amp hours, couple of those. I don't know.
I think like at this point, like I mean, sure, there's always going to be new guys, the underdogs that are going above and beyond to try to, you know, wiggle their way in the market share. But I mean, I think just kind of look at the ones that have been tried and true for years, you know, as far as like, I was going to say Focusrite, but that's not the right word. Fortress or
Fortress makes a good battery. Discover makes a good battery.
I'm never buying the new guy. The new guy, no.
What's a new guy?
A new guy in the market share? I don't want any new guy. I want something that's been around.
Yeah, several of the batteries that we have worked with that were the new guy turned out to be rather disappointing in their overall, you know, quality and workmanship. I don't really want names.
Other than Fortress and Discovery, who else do you guys that you like? And like, look, there. I mean, look at you want to make sure that UL listed. I know EG4s are on a lot of DIY's radars, but we don't offer the EG4 because they're not UL listed, and there's been some issues in the past. So we only work and recommend ones that we feel confident are going to be there for the long haul. I'm not trying to like talk bad about EG4s. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of applications being used.
People have struggled with EG4s, and that's not your fault. I have spent an exorbitant amount of time providing technical support for Endure batteries, which struggle big time on the BMS side of things, and the state of charge accuracy is just not there to where I hate when people reach out with Endure batteries, because they have all kinds of problems that are specifically related to the batteries just not being put together the right way.
Can you quickly do a blurb on BMS real quick for folks who don't know those?
So when you're putting together a lithium battery, you have a couple of different components that need to go in there. You have the cells. They're lithium iron phosphate cells. Each of them is 3.2 volts.
That stores the power.
They're either going to be cylindrical and look like a D cell battery, like a Duracell or Energizer, or they're going to be prismatic, and they're kind of shaped more like pouches, right? So we have cylindrical and prismatic lithium iron phosphate cells, and then those come in either A grade, meaning that this is the good stuff, or B grade, meaning this is what was left over. But technically, they're the same thing. Wink. So that's part of it. The other thing is the battery management system, or BMS. That's the brains of the battery. Lead batteries are just lead in a jar of acid, right? There's no brain. The lithium iron phosphates have printed circuit boards is usually what you have. And so it's a computer, right? There's a printed circuit board inside and several relays that dictate when you get access to the contents of the battery, right? If the voltage gets too high, the little relay opens, no more. Or if it gets too low, little relay opens, no more. If you're pulling too much current, little relay opens, no more, right? So the BMS in a lithium battery is the brains. It's the computer that takes care of the battery. It does a bunch of other cool things, like it monitors each bank of cells, like each one should be 3.2 nominally, and it shouldn't get up above 3.5 volts per bank of cells, right? So the BMS is doing all of this cool work, but then it's like, who made the BMS? Like, where did they get the printed circuit board? Is it quality material, right? Like, and even if it was, you have to get an engineer that understands what we're trying to accomplish to get in and say, well, all right, these cells I need the per cell voltage target to be 3.54. And then if any of the cell banks get above 3.6 to then stop the entire thing, So there's like a crazy amount of zeros and ones and thought that needs to go into the BMS of the battery. And if you don't understand lithium iron phosphate or, battery-based energy storage, you're not going to do it right? Like, I see a bunch of the cheap lithium batteries. They have their closed loop communication and battery management system numbers are garbage to me, because I understand lithium battery cells and how the balancing and how all of the things work. And I'll look at it and go, well, that's pretty sloppy. They just put in 3.7 and just decided that that's good when we know it needs to be 3.54. Like, why'd they phone it in? They made a great battery with decent cells, and then they made the BMS as shit. So it's so all these things that go into it are huge considerations, and it's exhausting. Like, well, are these prismatic cells or cylindrical cells? Well, are these A cells or B cells for the quality grade? You know, does the BMS have just like passive cell balancing, or is it active cell balancing where there's actually circuits between the banks of cells where if this one's at 3.6 and this one's at 3.2, the 3.6 will balance out the 3.2, like active balancing. That costs more, a lot more to build that into a battery. If you don't build in active balancing and it's just kind of like, yeah, whatever, it'll eventually balance itself out, you've just made a cheaper battery. Now all you have to do is convince people to buy it, right? And you can. They'll buy your battery that's cheaper because they don't know what the hell, you know, cell balancing is about and whether or not it's smart cell balancing or like active or passive.
It's
Like-
almost like you have to convince people to buy the more expensive one because, of course, they're going to buy the cheaper one. But why would you spend a little bit more money on a decent battery and it's everything you just said?
You know, and it's so hard. The spec sheets don't say, you know, A grade cells, prismatic. You know, that's like lithium iron phosphate. 12 volts.
How do you find that? Where do you find if it's A grade or B grade? On Reddit?
I think so. We circle back to a point where Reddit might actually be useful, you know, because there are people who are going to do research. People like me who maybe don't have kids and animals, I guess, could just do like a whole bunch of research and be like, okay, well, I've figured out that, you know, these batteries actually are B grade cells and that they have passive cell balancing, right? Like, you're not going to hear that from whoever makes the battery. You know, you might be able to find it because people aren't allowed to hide shit from you. You could get onto the website and find a technical publication or a white paper that lays out the specifics of it. You know, there is a material safety data sheet for every UL listed thing that will tell you what it actually is, you know, but we're talking about from like a marketing perspective. If you do a Google search for it, it ain't going to come up, you know, it ain't, they're not like, hey, look at this, unless, you know, even if they're A grade cells and active balancing. And then, yeah, this is awesome. I still don't think they market it because nobody understands what that is.
Let's bring this to an armchair technician standpoint. How come the lithium battery in my DeWalt screw gun doesn't have a BMS?
It does.
It does.
Oh,
Is it in the charger?
It's in the battery.
Even in this little battery?
Yeah, did you open up the little plastic clamshell case that's inside of it?
It says do not open.
Well, right. Inside of it are a handful of, they're not 32 650s. Those are the big cylindrical ones like a D cell. They're 18 650s, which are little lithium iron phosphate cells that are the size of AA batteries. And they're in there with a little printed circuit board that dictates when power can go in and out of it.
All right.
And in that little tiny printed circuit board is the exact same stuff, right? But just a little bit different. It says, hey, you can pull power out of these lithium batteries for this drill as long as the temperature is below 120 degrees Fahrenheit, as long as it is above 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, you can pull power out of this to feed the drill as long as the voltage is above this and below this. And you can pull, so then it's like, it turns in, it's just a little teeny tiny BMS. And there's nothing really that smart about it. It's just kind of like, you know, can you take power out or not? And it's, if it's the right temperature and the right voltage, then you can.
So it doesn't have to be intimidating. It's not this BMS, some scary computer. It's just something that's managing the cells.
it's regulating things. Yeah.
No, don't let it be scary. Don't let it be scary. It's not a scary thing. It's just something that exists in there. You know,
Cool.
Don't try this at home. In my experience, I've taken lithium iron phosphate cells and cycled them ad nauseum without BMS at all, right? I would get in and say, I know exactly what the voltage target needs to be per bank of cells. I know the capacity and I know the amount of current that I'm going to be moving. So I know how long it's going to take. I've got the ability to monitor temperature. So I am a battery management system in that case, right? And so I charge up the battery cells, and I'm going through with my voltmeter going, this bank is 3.4, 3.35, 3.4, 3.41. They're all the same temperature, right? Like I'm doing the things that a BMS would do, but I'm
You
just
need to
like
get a tattoo.
and a little
You need to
temperature.
get it. Yeah, you need to get a tattoo that says human BMS or human battery management system authorization or something. Like you need to get something cool like that. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's my brother Harley.
And then when they question you, you can just rip off your shirt and be like, I am BMS.
I am BMS.
Dude.
One more
Because you
question.
don't want to sit there with a voltmeter being like, check the voltage of each one of these banks of cells. And then if any one of them gets too high, turn this off. Or if they get too low, turn it off. Or if they get too hot, turn it off. You're like, I've got stuff to do, man. I was going to listen to a podcast and make some bacon. Like, I don't have time for this. That's a BMS is just there to be like, well, look, man, just stick this in here and it will let power out if everything's cool. You know, like copacetic. If everything's good, it'll let you pull power out. And if everything ain't good, then it won't. You know,
Who's your favorite BMS like via battery company, like Discover, Fortress, or whoever?
no,
Like which BMS are you like have the less problems with? Let's just put it that way.
none of them.
They
I
all
don't
have their own
less problems with any of them.
Well, you said there was one battery that you didn't like because it had a BMS. It was notorious for having BMS issues.
Endure is notorious for BMS issues. The kilovolt battery that AltE was selling is notorious for state of charge issues. And the one that we were working on at Unbound also had state of charge issues. And
Which one was that again?
the problem, you guys, this doesn't have anything to do with the quality of the cells inside, right? I spoke with the applications engineer who headed up the kilovolt battery this week, and we talked at length about it. And it's one of these deals where it's like the cells inside of that kilovolt battery are top quality prismatic cells. They're made by Top Band. The guy I spoke with had a hand in all of the closed loop numbers and values, which were very carefully picked through. And the issue, and like the only real issue that I was able to drill down to, is the state of charge it's not always accurate, right? So the kilovolt battery might just be reading the wrong state of charge.
Can that be upgraded with firmware?
I know that. You just need to use a different shunt monitor to get the state of charge to read accurately. You know?
Can that be upgraded with like firmware or anything like that when you talk about BMS functionality?
Sometimes it can and sometimes it can't. Usually it can't. Like in the case of a kilovolt battery, it's you can update the firmware and it will help with a handful of things, but there are no firmware adjustments that take that into account. Like it's not, you can't change the way the battery reads the state of charge with a firmware adjustment. That's what I'm being told.
So what are we doing to solve that issue? As I know that's a new thing that you're going to be probably dealing a lot with moving forward. Like what is the solution to that?
You have to find the equipment that does work, right? And I'm not saying that you just need to choose a different battery. That's it kind of probably sounds like that's what I've been saying. But in this case, it was, these are really high quality cells that are arranged perfectly. And the one thing is that the state of charge that it displays just it's not right. You know, in this one case this week that I was working on, we got the voltage all the way up to the target voltage where it was supposed to be. I was like, yep, that's the right voltage. The current starts tapering off and we go, yep, all right, these are full. And so then we look at the actual state of charge on the app for the battery and it says 39%. And I go, no, that's not possible. We just looked at the voltage. We watched the voltage and we're looking at it. It's 100% charged just looking at the voltage. I promise. You know, and it was, well, why doesn't the battery say that for the state of charge? And we turn the battery off and we turn it back on. We say, well, this battery's the master and this one's the slave. Let's make this one the master and this one the slave. And we try all these different things to get the state of charge to read differently, and it just won't, right? So the applications engineer, he says, hey, Shwa, have you ever heard of the Victron BMV 715 or the 712? They're similar to the Victron Smart Shunt. And I go, yeah, I have. I've messed around with those quite a bit. And he goes, that's what you use. If you put one of those on this battery, you will always have an accurate state of charge. I realize this is not ideal, but it is real. And I was like, all right, well, that makes sense. You know, you got a battery where it does everything the right way, except it can't tell you the state of charge. You know,
so how easy is that to upgrade from a consumer standpoint? Is it something
easy.
where it's local? Oh, okay.
The Victron BMV 712 and 715 are like maybe $150. You know,
so you just tack that onto the
for the shunt with the circuit board and the display with the buttons and all of everything you need, and it's like less than $200.
So you override the native BMS?
Go ahead, Ben. I'm sorry.
Sorry, do you override the native BMS then in that regards? You can override that and say, hey, I want you to be listening to this device that I'm adding on.
No, because in the case of these batteries, the BMS, as far as, you know, when can I let power out? What's the high and low voltage settings? What's the high end temperature range and low end temperature range? Like all that stuff works. Right? Like we're literally standing there going, so how do I know my state of charge? It seems like a crock of shit. I have no idea what my state of charge is. But that's the only thing that's missing. It's a perfectly fine battery and it's doing exactly what it should be doing. You just don't have a fuel gauge for it.
Where does this shunt go? At the inverter?
At the battery. Between the battery and the inverter on DC negative. So a shunt monitor, it goes on the DC negative between the inverter and the battery. On the positive side, there's a big breaker, but on the negative side, there's a shunt. And it's like it's a little, how do you describe it? It's two big brass bolts and it has little fins that go between them, with the idea being that it just measures the amount of current, right?
It's like two bolts with the bridge in between. And so power's passing from the battery bolt to the battery cable bolt. And in between, there's a little bridge that allows you to measure something.
Right. Hey, Connor, will you make it so that there's a picture of a shunt right here so everybody could see? Or here? Or
yeah, we'll definitely do it.
Also,
I was just thinking
right here. This one.
I think we'll get to the point where maybe you can just jump on Google, kind of like Joe Rogan's podcast, and just throw up stuff from the internet and share it as we need it moving forward. But we'll definitely throw we'll have a lot of stuff on the post-production and stuff, so there'll be a little more visual context to our thoughts.
Let's take some questions.
Yeah, I mean, we got some viewers right now. We did get Clean Energy experts saying how much they loved it. But no questions. Yeah, no questions yet.
All right. Well, we just went over batteries pretty hardcore. I would say that wasn't a 101, but that was pretty advanced battery stuff. I mean, I've been doing batteries for 30 years and some of this stuff is still foreign to me. I'm a golf cart battery kind of guy. My batteries, I'm the BMS, I guess, at my house.
You have to be if you're a lead acid battery guy, then then you're the BMS,
I'm a 12-volt guy.
right?
I'm not
And if
ready
you
for
had-
lithium.
And if you had 2 6-volt batteries that made your 12 volts, then every once in a while you would need to go through and say, hey, what's the voltage of each one of those batteries by themselves? Like, did you not just both of them make 12 volts? Like, does this one make 6.1 and this one make 6.3? Or do they both make 6.2?
I
Or
haven't
like
done that since the day I put them in.
human BMS?
Don't do as I say, do as I don't do. All right, cool. Let's go over off grid then. So that was a grid tie segment where you just have solar panels feeding an inverter, turns your meter backwards. That's pretty easy. Turn the meter backwards, turn it forward at night, turn it backwards in the day, turn it forward at night. That's grid tie. Has nothing to do with backing up your loads during a power failure. Straight up about return on your investment, battling the cost of electricity. Off grid, it's pretty cool. It's the same scenario, but now you have batteries. So you have a solar panel creating DC current. It's sending power into the battery. There's a thing in between there called a charge controller. I guess that's where the BMS would kind of come in too, but you have solar panel charging the battery. That's all DC power, just like in your car. You can't plug a hairdryer into that. What you do now is you put an inverter on your battery. So now you can take your 12 volt, 48 volt, whatever it is, and create regular household electricity. That's called an inverter. It's kind of like a converter, but it's inverter. It's just wordage. It's taking the DC power and making it usable for regular old stuff. That's off grid. This is the most expensive way to go with solar, but it's priceless, really. If you think about living out in the middle of nowhere where there isn't a utility connection, a classic scenario would be somebody calling me and saying, I want to go off grid because I'm mad at the power company. We've already discussed this. That's not really practical. But somebody that calls me and says, it's going to cost $120,000 to get a utility connection to my new off-grid house. I want to go off-grid. Well, now you're kind of talking. You still need some education. It's really good to learn about off-grid living just in general, different ways to use your electricity during the day when the sun is out, ways of conserving power, turning off your lights. One of the old school examples is a power strip, the little things with 8 power plugs and a switch. If you have a TV and a stereo entertainment center sitting there plugged in and you're at work all day, those are using power. They're using a lot of power, almost full what they would use when they're turned on.
We're talking about phantom loads?
Yeah, phantom loads. Well, let me talk about it for a second and then you can drill down. But if you have a TV, a stereo, a subwoofer, a DVD player, all the stuff we had 20 years ago that we don't have anymore, and they're sitting there turned off, they're drawing almost as much power as they do when they're turned on. And the very first off-grid thing I ever learned from Mark Coleman was put a power strip and turn it off when you're not using it. You can do this at your house even if you don't have solar, and you'll save some power right there from your kid's PlayStation 3. So what is a phantom load?
Well, what I want to know is how much phantom load are we really talking about per month? Like, we talking like it's a third of your bill, or is it a tenth of your bill? And I know when it comes to off grid, it's every little thing counts. I'm just kind of curious.
Probably
average.
like 2%.
Okay.
So it's
but
not
off grid. Yeah, off grid that matters, right? Because you're trying to like optimize everything. Yeah.
You could drain your batteries.
It's so expensive, right? Every time you're like, well, how many watts worth of stuff do you think that you're going to be using in a day? And they give you a list and you're like, all right, that's like 800 amp hours at 48 volts. So it's, like $27,000 in batteries. And they're like, well, now hang on a minute. I could unplug a lot of stuff now. Like everybody pumps the brakes when you actually, they're like this many watts worth of stuff. And you give them a battery bank size and a price and they go, oh, no. And they want it to be a lot less stuff.
Yeah, it's convenience versus money. Money talks every time.
Right. Because you could run those things on the grid easy. I could, I get a $500 power bill and I'm like, oh. But, if I wanted to put an off-grid system together to run my property, it would be like $300,000 would be what it would cost. And I ain't paying it.
And it still wouldn't be perfect.
No.
Well, yours would.
Well, hold on. How much are you running during the day versus how much you're running at night? Because won't that have a huge factor?
A huge amount.
Your fish tank
At
runs
night?
24/7.
My fish tank and my pool pump and my pool heater and everything I own runs 24/7. It's ridiculous.
Well, you could set your pool pumps. This is another thing, maybe just to run like most of the day, but maybe turn off for 6 or 8 hours to conserve some of the energy and just leverage the daytime sun power. So it doesn't drain your battery at night, and use that for more critical things like TVs and other stuff, right? You need to run a pool pump 24/7. I know some people do, but I know some people don't.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I just do.
So just some things that people can think about to make their system more optimized for solar, especially if they're just trying to have that backup solution. Like you don't have to run your pool. A lot of people just set and forget and move on. Like, no, you could probably run less of your pool pumps. They don't need to be 24/7, 365 days a year,
Hey, since I already shared how much power I use and how embarrassed I am, would it be cool to go through and try to drill down and see if I could make it be less? And then we could share with people what I found and was able to shave off?
Of course.
Yeah.
I
That would
really
be cool.
do that. And it's
Can you
just
also go outside and show how fast your meter's spinning?
in baseball and football and it's one of those projects that I need to find time to be like, dude, this is ridiculous. I need to figure this out. And
Is Jackson on All Stars? Is Jackson going to be on All Stars?
on All Stars. Yeah. So it was like, yay, the baseball season is over. But it was All Stars starts on Monday. And I was like, oh, right. So baseball's not really over.
Well, I guess we're playing each
other.
other. And it's in Mount Shasta. We don't have to go to Reading. Yes. Right. So you beat us last year. So we have
we've got some all-star kids. Yeah, that guy Jason's son Cole, he is a really solid pitcher for somebody who's like 11 or 12. It's crazy.
Well, we're excited. So I'll see you at the in Mount Shasta for our tournament.
Yeah.
I want you guys dressed in baseball jerseys next time.
I have a baseball jersey and stuff. That would be fun. I'm wearing my Chewbacca. This is my Chewbacca tank top. It's not entirely appropriate, but it's what I was wearing.
It's hot. It's hot in Siskiyou County up in NorCal.
Right? Trying to sit around without having all of my air conditioners on so I'm not broke.
I mean, I had to put on a shirt to go live, so.
And underwear.
I always have underwear. Okay.
No
So where are we? So that was off grid for a second. Phantom loads, this and that. Off grid, it's not something you want to do because you're mad. You never really want to do anything because you're mad. Always count to 10. Go to a meeting if you have to.
I've started doing that recently, but 10 didn't work, and I had to do 100.
That's all right.
I count back from 100, and like every single time I get somewhere around 30 and forget what I was angry about. So it works.
It also helps if every time you count a number, if you're counting to 10, if you take in a breath and let it out, like 1, 2. Anyway, well, I'll get into that in my medical podcast later. All right, so that was off grid. We're at about an hour and 36 minutes. You want to keep going with more topics?
No, I think we're good here. We got some good sound bites.
I had another thing I wanted to say about grid tie with battery backup because I feel like it's relevant. When you're sizing up grid tie, you just want to have panels that can offset all of or a portion of your power bill, right? And when you're doing off grid, you need to make all of the power that you use, and you also need to be able to store all of the power that you use, right? But grid tie with battery backup has this kind of interesting sizing. It's not really a rule, but it's like an option. When you're sizing up off grid, your battery bank size and your solar array size need to match, right? But when you're doing grid tie battery backup, you're completely free to say, hey, look, I have 45 solar panels because I use a lot of power from the grid. However, when grid power goes down, I'm actually only running my fridge and freezer and 2 strings of lights, 2 strings of outlets, and then I have a sump pump for my septic that might or might not turn on, right? And so your battery-based part of your system might be tiny compared to your solar. And you're like, dude, you got like 45 solar panels and 4 batteries? Like, what is this? You'd be like, well, when I'm connected to the grid, I'm like consuming 45 panels worth of grid power. So I have enough solar panels to offset what I use from grid. When grid goes down, 90% of my loads turn off and stay off until grid comes back. But I have 10% of my loads backed up, my fridge and freezer, and these lights and outlets, right? And so the battery bank size is based on the things you want to back up, where your solar array size is based on how much you want to offset off of your bill. So you'll see sometimes grid tie with battery backup, people will have a big ass solar array and a relatively small battery bank. And it could just be that they're doing some kind of neat energy arbitrage thing to save money, or, you know, that other I just said.
You can do that backwards too, that you can't do in off grid. You can't have 2 solar panels and 50 batteries if you're off grid. But if you were grid tied and you had a server room, and for whatever reason you just have 2 solar panels or something, but you have a giant battery bank for when the grid goes down to run your servers, it's like you're saying, it doesn't matter anymore. You can have mixed matched ratios of solar to batteries.
Right, because then it's just kind of like a UPS, like one of those little things you plug your computer and stuff into. It's got a tiny inverter and battery and stuff in it. That doesn't have solar panels.
Can you have the batteries that we sell without solar?
Yes.
It needs an inverter.
All day. Yep.
Batteries and inverter.
You could say, hey, out here in this neck of the woods, we charge our batteries up with micro hydro. And you got people with their Pelton wheels and all their different nozzles and stuff. And that's how they're making DC power, right? Or in this neck of the woods, we run stuff off of wind. I don't know why everybody sounds like they're from the South. They might be like, oh, around this neck of the woods here, we be using thermal power. And they're, or, you know, so everybody's going to have some means of, you know, charging from a renewable source. And it isn't always solar. There's
what
solar,
if they don't?
And there's hydro, there's geothermal, there's, I don't know, a bunch of different things. And you can charge batteries with any of that stuff.
What if there's nothing? Yeah. What if there's no DC power source? You just have a solar converter and a battery in the grid.
Oh, sweet. Right? You run the grid into your Solarc and connect your Solarc to your batteries, and then your Solarc output you would hook up to your fridge and freezer and lights and outlets. And then you'd go, hey, watch this. And you go out and you turn off your 200 amp breaker, and then you go open your fridge and the light's on and the compressor kicks on and you're like, fridge is on.
It's pretty sweet.
I mean, yeah, you could just have something that, you know, stores energy when it's cheap and use it when it's, you know, I know Tesla was known for that. They did a lot of things that were like with just a battery to help lower your costs and give you some flexibility during short outages, right? Long-term outages, that's a cool thing about solar is you got something to recharge it. But if you have that, just a battery backup with no solar, if that outage is, you know, more than 4 to 8 hours, you're not going to have anything to charge it, and that's when you got to get a hamster wheel and start running. Can you do that? Could you make an oversized hamster wheel and plug it into your Solark and be like, look, I'm going to just get my workout in and charge my batteries?
Yeah. Yeah, you totally could. I was messing around earlier this week with a friend of mine looking at different 48-volt alternators that you can get, and they're making them like for fifth wheels and motorhomes and stuff, where they're converting the house bank over to 48 volts. And so they've got these big old, like this one, my buddy's got an F450, and he's set it up where it's a dual alternator setup already. So one of them is 12 volts and I think like 185 amps or something. But the other one, he swapped over to a 48-volt alternator. And so now, he's charging his 12-volt crank battery for the truck and can also charge his 48-volt house battery for his fifth wheel through an alternator setup. And there's all kinds of neat ways you can get in and, use alternators and things like that to get a nominal 48 volts that you could charge batteries with.
That makes sense.
Pretty cool. Victron, interestingly enough, makes all of the best gear for anything mobile. Mobile and marine that's Victron's neck of the woods, and nobody does it better than they do, period.
Could we do like one of those cool like challenges where it's like, okay, we're going to create a human-sized hamster wheel and we're going to see what we can do with it, how much it would charge, and compare it to, like, say, a typical, other forms of charging, like, wind power or like hydro. Maybe someone has a creek, and like, because like, I don't know, or a bike. Like, what if you got a bike and you just rode it in place instead of, I don't know, that could be an interesting.
They already have that, dude.
Content.
Like in India and places, they have bikes where you have to sit there and ride it to go to your internet cafe to power up your laptop. You have to ride the bike.
Right. So then you just have to find an alternator that puts out the right voltage, and then you have to figure out how much force that it takes to turn the alternator. And then if it's like a bicycle, then you might need to change the gear ratio, add some ring gears and stuff to get it down to the right ratio so you could actually pedal it. And then, you'd have to do some experimenting to see, how fast you get those little getaway sticks going as quick as you can. How many RPMs is that? And then are we actually making any amount of, voltage or current that could be useful? And then if not, can we change the gear ratio again? And then at that point, we'd just be messing around. Yeah, we'd put it on a treadmill. We'd attach it onto a motor. We would hook a drill onto it and spin it with a drill. Be like, this is a lithium battery running a 48-volt alternator, charging another lithium battery. Like, yeah, we could mess around and figure it out. And I do think it would be really fun.
I think that would be a cool project.
Hysterical.
Can we use your house as a guinea pig? We'll get a big hamster wheel.
Yeah.
We'll build it. We'll document it.
100%. Now, I also think it would be cool if the big hamster wheel, I'd like to be able to set it up so that we could also have a water nozzle jet that could spin it, or potentially like air could spin. Like we could try to spin it with a fan. We could try to spin it with water. We could try to spin it with our legs. We could try to spin it with a drill. Oh, my tractor has a PTO where we could spin it at any RPM that we wanted. We could rig it whatever we wanted.
What about magnets? You get infinite energy. I always see those stupid videos. I don't know if that's real, but I mean, if you got batteries aligned right and they're spinning, am I going to get assassinated because I said that? I'm like, I feel like everybody finds ways.
There's only one way to find out.
I have 2 kids. No, but it would be interesting if you could get
things.
Well, what if you had magnets that would help assist it? Like, you'd still need to you still need to be like running in the hamster wheel or turning it, or on the bike. But the magnets would give you like an extra like superpower, so you could go. It would be easier. Think of it as a gear, because I feel like that it's got to be a thing.
Yeah, totally. Then I feel like one of the better concepts is to use magnetism to pull something away, and then to have springs associated that can then kind of pull it back. And if you look at some of these cool generators that are like on TikTok and stuff recently, you will see a guy that has like a big flywheel, right? Like a big mass flywheel, and he starts spinning it, and then he's, I don't know, he's keeping it going with magnets and stuff. So it's like the magnets are pulling the wheel this way, and that's stretching out these springs. And then as it goes past the magnetic point, the springs pull it back. And then the magnet pulls it and it stretches the springs a little. And then, oh God, I got to find it. I can't explain things very good.
Well, let's talk about this offline, because I think that could be a cool little documentation of, for somebody who's off grid. I think it'd just be cool. Like, dude, you could, have solar, but when push comes to shove, you got this really easy, manageable thing that you can kind of manually operate and power, emergency equipment, right? Like whatever that is, lights, refrigerator. Because really, a refrigerator, if you just power it for 3 or 4 hours and just don't open it, I mean, it could be good to keep your food healthy for a long time.
A deep freeze is even better because the cold doesn't fall out when you open it. One of my classic phrases is just that there's no such thing as free energy.
Is that it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I mean, let me see. Add to stage. Oh, that's Connor. Never mind. There's no free. Yeah, so there would have to be obviously labor to make the machine, and then some effort exerting energy, calories. So you're converting calories to power your house because you're moving your legs, your body.
Right.
But there could be. So you would have to consume more food. So I mean,
we can look at, we're setting into motion, a flywheel that has a given amount of mass. And so to take and put that initial, force into it to start rotating that mass, is not a whole lot. But then the idea is, and with a lot of these, you see that wheel, it gets to spin and you're like, hot damn, that's crazy. Free power, right? But we know if we hook that up to a 48-volt alternator that was going to charge a battery, that's going to be a shitload of resistance. Like that thing's going to stop on a dime, like, right? And it would be like, oh my God, because if you tried to take and turn the 48-volt alternator, you'd be like, oh yeah, there's resistance to this. You don't just spin this side easily and get magic power coming out the other side. You're like, you're like, yeah, there's some force to actually spin this alternator. And so you get a wheel to spin by itself. That's one thing. You put it under a load, it's immediately going to slow down and stop. And it's kind of a different scene.
Well, so you talk about 48 volt and then you got 12, 24. So if you had a 12 volt battery and you're doing that, would it require less friction to create enough to help charge the 12 volt system?
I doubt it. I wasn't prepared for those kind of questions, so I don't know off the cuff.
So I stumped you. We said in the beginning if you would pay that person $300 if you would stump
I said that I was. Well, I didn't say that I was stumped. I was letting you know that I was going to give you an educated guess, and if it's wrong, I'll give you your stupid $300.
The $300 we didn't make, but I'm adding that post.
Let me kind of quantify it in this way. Here's a thought that came to mind. My great-grandfather was a farmer before there was tractors, and there's photos of him pushing this thing that's like a push tractor. It's got a blade on the front that can cut the earth, but he's pushing it by hand. And that evolved into, okay, let's pull it with the horse. Okay, now they have motors. Let's drive it, And so life is becoming easier and easier from a physical exertion standpoint. You're no longer having to push this thing, but you're having to pay to let the tractor do it, right? So it's not free energy. It's easier, but you're paying for it. And I don't know how that applies to solar at all, but it's kind of like, yeah, you could use a hand pump to get your water out and pump 1,000 gallons physically and wear yourself out all day, or you can pay a couple of $1,000s and let electricity do it. Right. But there's no magnet on the market today that you can just buy and throw in there and it's going to do it for you. Like, there's no such thing as free electricity. The energy has to come from somewhere. And once it gets started, it doesn't go forever, even if it says it does on TikTok. I don't believe it.
Well, even if you could, like I said, you could get something to freewheel forever, and be like, yeah, this has got basically no friction. It's just going to keep going for 3 years before it stops. But that would be, then you're like, cool, hook this gear up to something that does work and see how quick it quits turning, So
nuclear
all,
might do it.
Nuclear would be the bomb.
But
right?
What is the price?
Where we could use hydrogen fusion, that would be the way to go about doing it.
As a species, we can't be trusted.
Sun uses it, hydrogen fusion. I think we're stuck like using plutonium and things like that for fusion, which I think is really backwards. I don't think it's very clean. But we can't do hydrogen fusion like they do on the sun because that's all like spherical, right? Spherical forces pushing down allows for the fusion of hydrogen. But on the planet Earth, we can't make cylindrical, we can make a pancake, right? Like we can make a hydrogen pancake and we can smash hydrogen molecules against each other in like a pancake. But it has to be uniform from every sides in a sphere to actually get, hydrogen fusion that works like it does on the surface of the sun.
So what's powering these cigar UFOs? Because that's some type of technology that seems to be beyond what we understand, which the government, by the way, has come out and admitted that there's unidentified flying objects, so they have no idea where or when or who they are.
Yeah, UAPs.
UAP.
Then there's underwater. Yeah, right? I love that. They're like, yeah, these exist. This concludes our press conference.
Those are probably using some anyway. I'm just having fun there.
Well, that's all
next on our show, Joe Rogan will be visiting us. No. Well, it's coming up on the hour, so 2 hours. So Connor, you will learn very quick that we say, hey, we're gonna do an hour and we have all these questions we want to go over, and then it gets hijacked into going deeper into one topic. But
we should stop here before we start talking about like civilization classifications and the cosmos.
You're right. We should.
I got a PhD in metaphysics. We could go on and on and on and on and on.
Yeah. Did we get? I mean, which is just great because I think eventually this could be like a 2-week thing. Could be we'll be able to cover more content. But
I think we did 2 hours is the most I could go. Do you think we could stream for 2 weeks
straight?
Yeah, I was joking.
I mean, we could go all day. I mean, we didn't even get to the questions yet.
That's probably my fault. I'm sorry.
What questions? The questions that you have written down, or what people have?
Exactly. What questions? That's the thing.
Well,
I think we answered a lot of questions, though. We did answer.
We answered some.
Okay, we'll give it. Let's do one.
Is there a website where we could like get fans, like rent them, be like, hey, could you show up to my podcast on Friday at 10 a.m. and just ask a bunch of solar questions? Here's a bunch of examples. You could actually just ask these questions. Here's a list of questions to ask.
I mean, we really could. The people that call us every day that want to talk about solar, and they're not really necessarily interested in buying solar today. That's right up our angle. Like, we're not interested in selling solar. Let's talk about it. We have people calling in all day long, and if we could somehow just get them involved in our podcast, it would be, to me, just the ultimate.
We got to start getting them on the phone, like on Car Talk. You guys remember Click and Clack?
Yes.
Can we do that? We could try an episode where we try to emulate Car Talk and see if it's fun and informative.
Can't you put something on our website that says, hey, we're going live on Friday, join us?
Yeah. We're getting there. We're going to start email marketing we have so many email contacts that we would like to, again, I didn't even know if this was going to work on the StreamYard. So I am actually really liking the StreamYard, way better than that Riverside. And we do have someone reaching out to us on YouTube at the moment.
We could have asking, like Zap and Buzz.
Here we go. We have a live one.
What are we talking about? We just talked 2 hours about solar, batteries, off-grid, battery backup.
Oh my gosh, right?
Franca.
Different types of lithium iron phosphate cells and battery management systems and active versus passive cell balancing. They kept trying to keep it 101, and I kept on trying to drag everybody into the advanced stuff. Sorry.
No, that's interesting stuff. I mean, Franca, you got a question, feel free to ask. If I don't even know if you're here for solar or you're just kind of finding us somewhere else. This is on our, they're not into that stuff. Okay. So we won't, no worries.
No worries. Me neither.
Get on out of here. We don't want your con here. No, I'm just kidding.
Everyone's talking about UFOs.
Oh my God. Yeah, right.
Oh, I heard you guys were talking about UFOs. So I just wanted to, we were talking about UFOs for a split second.
That's true.
But no. Okay. Well, okay. So why don't you give us one question, Will? One question, and we'll end with that. What's a common question you get that we haven't addressed already?
Oh man, how much does it cost to go off grid?
What a crappy question. You're gonna end on that?
I want to talk about UFOs. I don't. You've done this.
That opened up a can of worms.
How come on the planet Earth we're bound by physics when you can fly a cigar shape around the universe? Is it just something we did bad as a species and permanently bound?
It has to do with the way that we've allocated and used resources. And there are like different types of theoretical civilizations according to physics. Type 1, which we're not even really quite at type 1. And a type 1 civilization can use like planetary energy, and a type 1 civilization can change the weather and use the planet's energy to bring about change. And like a type 2 civilization is more like Star Trek, where you can harness the power of a star. And if you can harness the power of a star, then you are technically a type 2 civilization. And the last is a type 3 civilization, and type 3 civilizations are utilizing the energy of the universe itself, and not just the universe of a star, or the energy of a star, and not just able to bring about change on the planet itself by controlling the weather and that, which is a type 1 civilization. And so type 2, you are able to harness and utilize the power of a star. And as a type 3 civilization, you have the ability to use like the power of the whole universe. And that's where it gets a lot easier to manipulate the fabric of space-time. And that's where like Albert Einstein got into wormholes and the different theories that kind of explain a lot of how that might play out. You know, modern physicists tend to say that Earth, we are not quite at 1 for civilization type. We're type 0. But actually, we're like in Dubai and places, we're able to like shoot salt pellets into the sky and get it to rain. And so we're close to being able to manipulate the weather. And we're starting to see like celebrities and stars and things that are so big that we're starting to get some sense, like some semblance of global fashion, of global popularity and trends. Like Taylor Swift is popular every single place on Earth. And there are fashion things that are popular like everywhere on Earth. They're aware of this. And that's planetary stuff that a type 1 civilization would have. And we're somewhere around 0.7. So within the next 200 to 300 years, it's expected we'll be at a type 1 civilization where we can control the weather and harness the power of a planet. But still quite a ways away from being a type 2 civilization where you could utilize the power of our sun to do things, or a type 3 civilization where you can harness the entire power of the universe to travel anywhere that you want.
Nice.
Cool.
And we are kind of using the power of the sun with what we do. So that's a good place to circle back.
Right?
That is
damn near type 2 civilization already. Just buy yourself some solar panels and level up.
There you go.
I listen to a bunch of crazy ass podcasts from like brilliant physicists and stuff. Neil deGrasse Tyson is one that I listen to. And like, I don't know, all these concepts, they sounded like bananas. Like I'd never heard of them before, but they're real world stuff. I did some research and was like, this is super cool.
Did you listen to the Terrence Howard one yet?
No.
That guy's a movie star, like you were saying, and he's just off the charts wild with, you know, imagination and theory, and he invented his own periodic chart, and it's worth a listen, even though it's on Joe Rogan. It's
I
pretty
want to be smart. Being smart would be rad.
You're smart.
Thanks, dude. I don't know, man. You've seen my fashion and my power bill in my house. It's questionable, all of it.
Yeah, but you help so many homeowners with their solar needs.
I just like it. I like solar stuff and I like people. It works out good. It was kind of the same. Working as a paramedic was that same kind of thing where it's like, I just want to help people. Like I'm friendly and easy to talk to, and I just want to help people do stuff. And I like this because nobody dies. I get to do the exact same thing. Like, what kind of problem do you have going on? I'll ask good questions and we'll zero in on what it is and make a field diagnosis and start a treatment plan.
So you're kind of like a solar
You're not actually dying.
To the solar doctor.
Yeah, I've called myself a solar medic before. It's kind of clunky and sounds sort of stupid, so I gave up on it. But I did bring my paramedic, like how I would ask questions, figure out what's wrong, and I do that with solar too. And I don't know.
It's helpful.
Yeah, because I already had it in my brain on how to do it. Like you say, well, what was the onset? When did it start? What makes it better or worse? Is it stinging or stabbing, or what kind of pain is it? You know, does it radiate anywhere? How bad is it on a scale of 1 to 10? When did it start? You know, and it's like, so I have all of these, ask all of these questions in this order to get to where you can make a field diagnosis and start treatment. And so I just brought that over to solar and it works really well. I think.
Yeah, I mean, Connor's already slacking me like, yo, we got to make a whole series, Dr. Schwa. I mean, that even sounds like something you go to the Rite Aid and buy. But like your backstory on being like a medic and medicine, I think really plays into that. Like you have a thought process when you're trying to figure out what the problem is that a lot of medical professionals do. Like you have to kind of probe and get down to the thing. Like you said, is it sharp? Is it dull pain?
Right.
We'll give
And it's a mnemonic. It's OPQRST sample, right? Onset, provocation, quality, radiation, severity, time, signs and symptoms, allergies, medications, pertinent history, last time they had anything to eat. Like it's every time you follow the exact same, ask the same questions so that it's, consistent in what the results are. I've had good luck.
Cool.
One more question by Steve. Hold on one sec here. Let's see.
Who's Steve? Thanks for being here, Steve.
Hey, Steve.
Steve says, I like looking at your informational site, but wish I could get it together with all the off-grid system before our regulators make it impossible or we have a grid meltdown. So Steve, yeah, we kind of discussed this earlier in regards to if you're grid tied versus off grid. I know a lot of grid tied people want to go into an off grid kind of lifestyle, but kind of what we're recommending is you should always have the grid just as far as look at them as a backup solution and then get a battery backup for your grid tie system. You'll be a lot happier while the grid is working. You can kind of exploit that. Also use the battery to save a ton of money on not having to pay the utility on your night rates. But typically what we recommend for grid type people is just get some battery backup, whether that's a whole home backup or partial backup. But disconnecting from the grid is not something we actually recommend if you're already tied to the grid. Right, guys?
I have some thoughts on it too. Ben, everything you said was 100% accurate. From taking sales calls with the exact same scenario, I really like, unless you had an unlimited budget, I like the approach of building a system in pieces. And if you buy the solar panels and a grid tied inverter that has battery capability in phase one, and you're still saving money to buy your battery bank, you can put in a grid tied system that's going to be off grid capable later so that it starts to pay for itself. Okay. So you're reducing your electrical bill. You're not cutting them off completely, but you're letting your grid tied system start to pay for itself. And then you're watching the world and you're buying your batteries right before the shit hits the fan. You don't want to put in batteries today if we have 5 or 10 years before that happens, because they'll just start to age. You want to get the batteries right before.
Dude,
well, how are you going to forecast that? You never know, man.
You got to pay attention.
There are options. Lithium batteries will just sit there and be fine forever and ever and ever. So you could get lithium and let them just set. They just need to be between 20 and 80%. The people who I've worked with who were like, money is no object. This is Fallout Shelter. And I'm like, whoa, cool. And so for them, we sold them 24 2-volt lead acid batteries, 1200 amp hours, the big L16s flooded, and 24 of those exact same batteries, but dry cells. And we sold them, oh my God, like 35 gallons of sulfuric acid. And so
is that even legal?
Yeah, it totally is. And so he has an entire bank of batteries ready to go. And all he has to do is put 3.5 gallons of sulfuric acid in each one and brand new batteries. And that's cool.
That's ultimate.
Guy, you have to get to his site with a helicopter, which is dope.
So where is he?
We can't tell you.
Somewhere, he said that he shares a property line with Warren Buffett, and I think it's Colorado.
My ultimate bug out is the inside of Mount Shasta. That's where I'm going.
Telos?
Inside the mountain.
That's where Telos is.
Oh, I don't know Telos.
What? That's what's inside of Mount Shasta.
I don't know.
What? Oh my
Lemur-
God.
Lemurians and
oh.
cheeseburgers. Sorry, this isn't what Steve was asking. So just to recap, my approach was a financial approach where you buy the grid tied now and put batteries later. Schwa mentioned if money is no object, then you buy a backup set of batteries and just have them ready to go. And then finally, revert back to sticks and stones and hand pumps.
Dude. Yeah, just don't have power at all.
Don't need power. The ultimate is to not need it.
If you could have a Grundfos pump and like a cistern and you could just hook 6 solar panels up to it and it would just pull water out of the ground every day from sunshine, that'd probably be enough.
That is life right there. If you can grow your own food.
And you don't need an inverter at all. You just need some solar panels and a water pump that runs on DC. But everybody's different, man. You get to choose what it is you want to have. It's a choose your own adventure, right? And the more money you have, the more wild your adventure can be. It's, I don't know.
I find that very interesting.
I mean, crazy amount of power here. I showed you guys my $518 power bill, but did I tell you that my backup source is a 3,000 watt Honda generator and it runs through like a 30 amp transfer switch, right? Like when it boils down to it, I don't use that much power here to keep the lights on and my food cold. The rest of it's just all ridiculous. When the grid's up and available, I'm partying. I'm like, yeah, I have everything turned on. And as soon as the grid goes down, I'm like, oh crap, I need to turn off everything. I just need my lights and outlets in my fridge and freezer.
It's all relative, isn't it?
1,000 watt generator and turn it on and run my stuff. My fish tanks are on, my gecko's happy, and I'm back to watching Harry Potter. Like, so it's about what works for you and yours, If I was going to try to have a system that would back up everything, I couldn't do it. Well, when it came down to it, the only thing that was really important is that I'd be able to see where I'm going and that my food doesn't go bad. So
the fridge and the water pump.
I'm going to get a hand pump for my well. After seeing that off-grid guy that we talked to earlier this week, that site where they had the hand pump, I made me so jealous I almost couldn't handle it. They had their actual well pump was at like 120 feet and their water level was at like 40 feet. And their hand pump that they had added onto their wellhead went down, he said 65 feet. So dude could go out there and hand pump water out of his well. It was the first time I had seen that in like 10 years.
That really was the ultimate off-grid place.
Brilliant. Every off-grid well pump should have a hand pump. How come that's the first one I saw?
So Steve's also wondering about the Diablo Canyon power plant, which is basically between San Francisco and LA. I guess it's a big power plant. I don't know much about that power plant being shut down. I can tell you from personal experience up here, I actually used to live on Copco Lake. It was a provider for Pacific Power, which is one of the bigger utilities up in Northern California outside of PG&E. And they just knocked out 2 dams here this year and completely drained two big like lakes. I used to actually live on Copco Lake, so it looks weird now as a river instead of a lake. But that will cost. Usually, that cost of shutting down or the cost of dam removal definitely was passed down to the homeowners. And then PG&E might just end up buying their power if they need to from other sources in the country, and then just pass the different cost to the homeowner. So I don't know much about that. I can't really speak on much of it. I could just tell you
what would happen if they dropped an EMP on Diablo Canyon?
I don't know. That's a pretty wild question.
Well, that's kind of what he's asking about, right?
Oh, I don't know. Is that what he said? Maybe he said if it just died, or they say they're ramping down for a total shutdown.
What if someone just straight up took it out? I mean, how hard is it to really put an EMP on us? I feel like they've been just waiting and waiting, and they could have done it this whole time.
Who's they? You sound like a freaking psycho.
That's the number one question people ask me when they want to go off grid. What if and I'm saying they out of respect because I don't want to name drop who they think they are, but the number one fear with preppers is an EMP.
Yeah. Well,
Do they get the
valid
EMP
concern.
add-on for Solark?
Yes.
Do they get that? Yeah. Does that really work?
Nobody knows, Ben. There's never been an EMP.
Hmm.
We can take it
How
to both
much is-
sides of this scenario.
Yeah, how much is the add-on for the EMP add-on? It's like 1,000 or something.
Like $3,000, dude. Have you seen the new EMP blanket they made for the Tesla truck?
I saw that.
And you say you think I'm acting crazy. This is the number
know,
one
it looks
fear
like
of
a
America.
tinfoil tent.
Your number one fear should be, where am I going to get my food? The number one fear is like, how am I going to watch the internet?
Right. What if I can't take my Cybertruck out to view the devastation?
Pull the EMP blanket off. Voila, I can drive, suckers.
Oh man. I don't know. I don't
I'm
know anything about
crazy
the
one.
Diablo Canyon power plant. I wonder if it was like was it a hydro plant, I wonder, or what? I don't know.
It sounds like
It
it
looks like
serves millions and millions of people.
It's right there on the ocean. So it must be,
Tidal
Leverage.
power.
yeah.
Tidal power would be cool.
Dun, dun.
Yeah, I don't know. Well,
Okay,
we know
so-
that they're taking away the ability for them to add in power into their own system, that it's going to make what power is left more expensive. You know, we could pretty much guarantee if they're shutting down Diablo Canyon power plant, that power is going to have to come from somewhere else. You know, so all the logistics of where it's going to come from. And I don't really get this whole, we'll buy it from some other part of the country. And then you just like, you lost me.
I don't understand that either.
I made 1,000 kilowatts a couple years ago. You want to buy that? Yeah.
There is they are a lot of utilities do buy energy at it's like a stock market of rates. So they'll buy it from over here, they'll buy it from over there, and then they resell it to the homeowner, right?
To me,
When
that's
they're
So you're saying our entire country is connected by this grid?
yeah, except for Texas. They're the only ones who are like kind of independent.
Hell yeah. Well, so if they dropped an EMP on the grid,
But then you look at what happened to Texas in 2021. There is like a free market as far as there's like a million different providers. So then, a lot of people are like, it was like crazy. It was like costing them like $200 or like $2,000 during that time of crisis because they jacked up the kilowatt hour. It's not regulated. So they jacked up the kilowatt hour to some ridiculous amount because they could. So it's kind of like, sure, you're like independent from the grid, but you're still getting gouged. It's like that free market thing. So here's the funny thing about energy. It is in most part of the country, a monopoly, right? Where I guess in Texas, it's kind of not, but there's the cons, which is like, then, there were situations where it wasn't regulated and they were charging through the yin yang when power was very scarce. So supply and demand. And people are just like, I can't pay $2,000 for a couple of days of power because there was a national crisis. So there's that, which if you're in Texas, protect yourself, get some batteries, get a generator. And so if that happens again, you're okay. I know people were freezing in Texas, of all places. They're having issues with warmth. I think it was during February 2020. 2021? No, it was 2020. Connor, fact check.
that was peak COVID.
That's funny.
Anyway, all right, we should probably wrap this up, guys.
All right. This is fun, though. I'm glad we do this.
That was fun. Yeah, we got some good stuff, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks for those people that showed up and took a look and asked questions and stuff too. That's freaking sweet.
I hope we didn't scare Steve off. Steve, please come back next week.
We probably didn't scare him off. If we scared him off, that's okay.
Tell your friends.
A lot of people named Steve.
Most of the Steves I've met are cool too.
Do I know
My
a
neighbor. Hey, my neighbor's name's Steve, and Grenvik sold him a system. John Grenvik, back.
I sure do like John Grenvik. I care quite a bit about that guy. We share the same birthday.
You
And we're the
really?
same height. And wait, and covered in tattoos. He's the cooler version of me.
Let's have him on as a guest.
Whoa!
Been out of the business for a couple of years. He'd probably come in hot with some questions.
Well,
Well,
'cause
you know,
he
he's
jumped out of solar and he's been doing real estate.
he's doing real estate, so I know he has a lot of homeowner. Probably have that. I'm sure they ask questions, and he wouldn't be a bad person to come on and talk about the value of solar and his thoughts on that and being in real estate.
Plus, he's
Let's
just
do it.
one of the kindest people I've ever met. I really enjoy his company.
And I gave him all my sound gear, my microphones and stuff. I want some of that stuff back. I just gave it to him. Like,
Oh my God. Have you guys heard him play guitar?
Yeah.
He's one of those guys. Has like a collection of custom guitars that he had made just for him, and like posts on Facebook, just like him shredding guitar solos. I'm like, I didn't realize, and pulled him up and was like he's really, really good. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and he doesn't even brag about it.
No, he doesn't. You wouldn't. You have to remember that he's so talented at guitar that it's bonkers. And I worked with him for years and years, and he never said anything about it. He would always talk about how awesome I was at doing solar stuff, and never pumped himself up on his music and stuff. Just stumbled onto it and realized he was a savant. It's amazing.
it's funny. Like, why his name? We used to go golfing after, at Lake Shastina Resort there. John, and even in Weed. Why can't I think of his name? He helps with plan sets, I think.
Dirk.
Who?
Dirk.
Dirk?
Charlie.
Yes, Dirk. God, sorry, Dirk. No disrespect. We used to golf all the time, us three. And then Cheyenne would jump in too sometimes. So,
That's rad. Golf. How come no
yeah,
one invited me?
I don't know. I don't think you golfed.
I guess not.
I'm sad you didn't invite me, but I don't golf and I don't live in California. So,
I don't golf, but I still would have liked to have been invited.
all right, dudes, I'm going to call it. I'm
All
out
right,
here.
All right.
All right, don't wait. I'm gonna end stream, but don't leave so it can upload, or I can send you the link.
Oh, yeah, we got to stay on.
Well, here, let me go ahead. Bye.
Love you guys.
Bye.
Later.
Love ya.